effectively. What if we had two systems, one for dealing with things in normal situations, and the other for emergencies? That won't work. It won't nurture our leaders. The people will follow their leaders in emergencies and work together, because they know those leaders are also capable in peacetime. The chief's will was firm, and he had explained his reasons. With a sour expression, Henry asked her final question. When do you need my answer? I won't rush you for it. Take your time and consider it. I understand. After Henry said that, she stood and left. Diamond suit, diamond suit, diamond suit. As she left the chief's house, Goku followed behind Henry. Say, I want to think about this. Could you let me be alone for a bit? Got it, Ain-san. Then, take your time and think about it. The rest of us will back you up, Ain-san. If you need anything at all, just let us know. Yeah, I'll be counting on you then. After watching Goku leave, Henry returned to her own home. Can I be a good chief? Henry did not think so. Who knew, when the time came, she might have to give an order she did not like, sacrificing the few for the greater good. I can't do that at all. Everyone in the village thinks too highly of me. For starters, there's the goblins that everyone says are my strength. They aren't even allies I made with my own charisma and connections. In the end, they were merely summoned from the horn given to me by the great magic caster Ain's Ulgaun. That item was the first bit of good fortune the village received. Strange, was I the first person he helped? I do remember Gaon-sama in a mask. Was he wearing a mask? Suddenly, the sequence of events seemed muddled up to her, but that was only to be expected given the chaos of the situation. Henry shook her head to clear out her doubts. In any case, if the horn had been given to anyone else, that person would have been the next chief, not herself. Which meant that the problem was not a matter of Henry's own competence, but simply that destiny had decided to drop this burden on her lap. I should talk to someone about this. The first person who came to Henry's mind was Nfiria. He had lived in the big city before, seen a lot of people, and Henry felt that he would know if she could be the next chief. And he was widely read, so he would definitely be able to give her an answer. However, the chief had said that Nfiria, or rather, the barriers, had approved of her succession. That meant that even if she talked with Nfiria, it was very likely that he would recommend she take the position. He won't do, and neither will any of the villagers. That leaves Agu and the ogres, but Agu already thinks of me as the chief, and the ogres are just plain dumb. At this moment, someone called out to the frowning Henry with a cheerful voice. Yo, seems like you're done talking, Oyen? What's wrong, Sue? You've got a strange look on your face. Problem, Henry? That voice made Henry jerk up, as though electricity were coursing through her skin. That's right. She was an outsider to the village, a neutral third party who could calmly and logically assess the situation. Henry ran toward Lupus Regina with all her strength. Lupus Regina-san. She tightly clutched the surprised maid's shoulders. What's this? Oh no, my heart's beating so fast. But please don't confess to me. I'm not a lesbian, I like the opposite sex. No, let me go, I'm going to be raped, Sue, wait. Please, wait a bit. Henry's hands left her shoulders, because she was planning to cover Lupus Regina's mouth. But Lupus Regina nimbly slipped out of Henry's grasp and smiled to her. Ah, sorry, but you seemed so excited, I thought I needed to cool you down a bit. It was just a joke, Sue, it's a really bad joke. Henry sagged her shoulders. However, she immediately recovered again. Lupus Regina was a person who came and went as she pleased, and if she did not take this opportunity to pin her down, she would vanish again. Please hear me out. I need an idea on what to do next. I dunno what you're talking about, but we can talk while we walk, right? I don't want the villagers to look at me strangely. Henry's face turned bright red. Lupus Regina had a point there. However, then don't scream about being raped or anything. Lupus Regina stuck her tongue out at Henry in an adorable way. Really, Lupus Regina-san. Come, let's go. Without waiting for an answer, Lupus Regina set off, and Henry followed. Well, come lay your problems onto Lupus Regina Onizan. I can teach you all sorts of things from eki things to seducing men. Is that right? Lupus Regina-san, you must be really mature. To Henry, who knew nothing about such matters, she certainly seemed adult enough. There was no obvious change, but for some reason Lupus Regina seemed to look more mature now. That's because I'm a Mimidoshima, after all. TL note, young woman with a lot of superficial knowledge about sex, etc. What does Mimidoshima mean? As Henry pondered the strange term, Lupus Regina beckoned her over with a come-hither gesture, indicating that she should ask her questions. Henry began telling her about what had happened in the chief's house. So what should I do? Beats me. That was all. Hey, didn't you say I could lay my problems on you? I never said I'd answer them, did I? Well, waitevs. To begin with, if you're being pushed into this position, and you know you're going to regret it, then you'd better not take it on to begin with. Think about what kind of things you can and can't handle. The usual carefree girl was gone, and in her place was a haunting, bewitching beauty. The usually wide-open eyes were narrowed, and her thin smile sent a chill down her spine. This is just my opinion anyways, I'm not telling you what to do or anything. You should sit down and think carefully on this. Let me be frank, it doesn't matter if you or someone else is the chief, whoever does it is going to mess up sooner or later. There's only 41 people I know who'll never make a mistake. So there's no point worrying about what happens when you fail. But when you think about it calmly, nobody's better suited to the job than you. What do you mean? Ask the gobs. When the village is attacked by scary monsters, and they know they can't win, what happens? Imagine the situation with yourself as the chief and yourself not being the chief. Lupus Regina's expression changed again, and she was back to her cheerful self. This is boring. This doesn't suit my tastes at all. It would be more fun if you didn't become the chief, and a great tragedy befell the village, Enchan. Lupus Regina smirked as she patted Henry's shoulder. Personally, I think you'd make a great chief, Enchan also, why don't you ask that boy over there? After taking her hand off Henry's shoulder, Lupus Regina twirled in place. It was a movement that seemed estranged from any concept of the word friction. See ya then. Lupus Regina strode off, her hands fluttering through the air. In front of her stood Infiria with Nemia's hand in his. Lupus Regina patted Infiria on the shoulder, and as though she had flipped a switch, the two came to life. You're home, Wani-chan. Nemia must have been very worried, because she tackle-hugged Henry while running at full speed. For a moment, Henry thought she might be knocked down, but her sturdy leg muscles absorbed the impact. Welcome home, Henry. You're earlier than expected. Didn't spend the night? I'm back, you two. And yes, I camped out last night. Is that so? I'm glad you weren't attacked by monsters. Still, I can't approve of that sort of thing. The goblins are strong. But there's still monsters who are stronger than them. Granted, I haven't seen any of those near the plains. Nay-san, don't do dangerous things. Nemia said this while clinging tightly to Henry's clothes. Henry was the sole surviving family member her little sister had. Her life was no longer solely hers. It would seem she had forgotten that little detail. You're right. I'm sorry. Henry smiled and gently ruffled Nemia's hair. I forgive you. Nemia looked up and smiled. Thank you. Speaking of which, have you been a good girl, Nemia? You didn't give Enfi trouble, did you? Really, Wunchin? I'm not a little girl anymore. Right, Enfi-kun? Ahaha, well, I've been treating Agu's tribespeople, so I didn't look too closely, but I trust Nemia behaved herself. Really, you too, Enfi-kun? Say, did you know Nei-chan? Enfi-kun stinks. Nemia-chan. That's the smell of herbs. When you grind them up, didn't you say your hands stank as well? That colorful stuff is from herbs? No, it's different. That's from making alchemical items, so don't make it sound like I stink or anything. But you do stink, don't you, Enfikoen? Nfiria's face froze. It's all over your work clothes, Enfi. So maybe you should take them off when you're not working? Enri frantically tried to explain her little sister's actual meaning, and Nfiria's face softened as he heard it. I don't have any other clothes, though, in Erantal I pretty much wore those all the time. Then, what if I made a set for you afterwards? You can do that? Enfi, who do you think I am? I can still make simple clothes on my own. Is that it? I bought all my clothes, so being able to make your own sounds awesome. Well, thanks for that. But everyone in the village can. Nimue, you'd better start learning. 'Kay then, Nimue, do you mind heading back first? I need to discuss something with Enfi. Nimue covered her mouth with her hands, but the smile was already making her eyes sparkle. Got it. Then, I'll be going first. Do your best, Enfikoen. Nimue waved to them, then headed back home with a spring in her step. Enri watched her back as she left, mumbling to herself. Why is she so obedient? Are you hiding anything from me? No, I don't think. There's more important things than that. Were you going to tell me something? Although I can roughly guess, since I was at the village meeting yesterday. That being the case, they could skip a lot of pointless exposition. Enri told Nfiria what she and the chief had discussed. That was not all. She also told him all about her uneasiness and her discussion with Lupus Regina. After she finished, Nfiria looked Enri straight in the eye and spoke. I think you should do what you think is right, Enri. No matter what your answer is, I'll always support you. Ugh, that line is so cheesy. I hope you'll become the new chief. Why? No. You're not just a simple village girl. You're the leader of the goblins, Enri Amot. You probably want to say that the goblins aren't your strength, right? But in the end, the goblins really are your strength. Lupus Regina asked you to ask the goblins, but I'll explain. If you're not the chief, and if the village is in danger, the goblins will evacuate you, and only you if they still have the strength to fight. No way. They would never do such a thing. They might say that in peacetime. However, during a crisis they'll do just that. I heard it from them myself. No way. Enri looked incredulously at Nfiria. She felt he must be lying. Yet, she could not sense any falseness from around him. The most important thing to them isn't the village, it's you. But if you become the chief, then the village becomes your property, and the goblins will stay and fight for the village to the bitter end. It may not seem like a big difference, but it's enough of a difference. As an aside, they've told me that if an emergency like that happens, they're hoping I can take Nimue and flee behind you. Enri, if you want to check with them, it's fine. But I hope that if you do, you'll keep the fact that I told you about it a secret. I won't ask them. Nfiria lifted his hair up as he heard the straight, direct reply, revealing his wide eyes. Is that okay? I might be impossible. You would never lie to me, Nfiria. I trust you. Still, they really do place a lot of importance on their master, huh? Well, isn't that because you're their master, Enri? You bought weapons for the goblins, right? Don't you think they'd make you their top priority because of that? This may sound bad, but the goblins have never gotten anything from the villagers, who treat them as nothing more than your summoned monsters. One side doesn't treat them like individuals, while the other side does. Doesn't it make sense for them to favor the latter? Of course, none of the villagers would actually say that sort of thing out loud. However, it was true that she could not recall any of the villagers thanking them in any concrete way. But, the villagers occasionally make lunch for the goblins. That's a sign of their gratitude to you. It's like saying they'll pay food costs, or save you the trouble of preparing a meal. Have you ever seen anyone in the village call the goblins by name? She had not. At first she thought it was simply because they could not tell them apart, but perhaps they had never intended to tell them apart from the beginning. The thought of that filled Enri's heart with an indescribable loneliness. Is that so? Yet, in her voice was not simply dejection, but her eyes shone with the light of resolve. That's right. That's why I, personally, feel that you'll be a good chief. If nothing else, when you're chief, things will change for the goblins too. Everyone's going to help me, right? Of course. You might as well say nobody won't help you. I understand. Then, I'll head over to the chief's place. I'd better do it before I change my mind. Nfiria smiled as he heard Henry's declaration. His smile was gentle, yet stern. It was as though he understood that she was hoping for one last push in the back. All right. Good luck, Henry. She nodded in reply, and then without looking back, set foot on the path to becoming the new chief of Karn village. Diamond suit, diamond suit, diamond suit. From the sky, Lupus Regina could see that almost everyone in the village was gathered in the village square. Henry walked to their head and addressed them, but she could not hear what Henry was saying. Henry appeared to have finished, and the villagers applauded. Ha, so it turned out like this after all. Ah, this is fun, oh hee, what's so amusing? The voice from behind made Lupus Regina turn around to face it. Oya, if it isn't Urine. Are you flying because of a magic item? That's right. Ain Salma bestowed it upon me himself. This would be Karn village, right? That would be why you were scolded. That's right, Sue. Ah, now the real fun's about to begin. What do you mean? A new leader has just arisen within the village. To the villagers, they're about to turn to a new page in their history, to a new world of possibilities. However, I wonder what would happen if, right at this glorious moment, the village was attacked and everything was lost in a great blaze. I wonder what kind of faces those villagers would make? Her cheery and beautiful face cracked open, and something flowed out from within that could only be described as evil. And I thought you got along with these people. Is this coming from the bottom of your heart? That's right, Urine, I mean every word of it. It gives me a thrill every time I think of the people I get along with being brutally trampled like bugs. You're a complete sadist. You're as bad as Solution. Why are my little sisters like this? My only salvation is Shizu, honestly, although I suppose Intoma isn't a bad girl. Lupus Regina laughed as her older sister grumbled and knit her brows. Ah, will the village be destroyed after all? Part 4. Ah, I'm so tired. Henry dumped the small slate she was holding on the table and flopped down, devoid of energy. She heard quiet laughter, and when she turned to look at its source, she saw her teacher, Nfiria, there with a smile on his face. You've worked hard, Henry. It's so hard I'm not good at using my head. You need to learn how to read and write, you know. Henry's reply was a mournful whine. She needed a basic level of education as the village chief, which was why Nfiria was personally instructing her, but Henry's head felt like it was splitting apart. These stupid words, they were made up just to give me trouble. Don't say that. You've already learned how to write your own name, haven't you? And Mimi-chan's as well. Well, that is a good thing, can't I get by with just that much? Alas. These are merely the basics. Look at it this way, you've only started learning for 5 days, we haven't even reached the important parts yet. A look which said "Are you kidding me?" appeared on Henry's face. Ah, don't make a face like that. Once you learn the basics, all that's left is applying them. That's why they're so important. You look really tired. Then, we'll stop here for today. Henry sprang up from her seat as though she had been waiting for him to say just that. That's wonderful. Let's end early tomorrow too. Thank you, Enfi. Nfiria smiled thinly before wiping the chicken scratch-like letters off the slate. Then you'd best get a good rest. Tomorrow we'll start again at the same time. I'm really happy that you're using your experiment time to teach me all this. But I don't feel grateful at all, Well, that's how it is. They say it's better for a teacher to be hated by their students than to be thanked by them. That's a lie. It's a total lie. Ahahaha. Ah, I'm out of time. Good night, Henry. Good night. Don't work too hard when you get back and sleep early. Nympharia smiled to show he understood, and then he left through the front door. After watching the floating mote of his magical light recede into the distance, Henry returned to her house. In the darkness, it felt especially lonely. "Ah, I'm so tired." Henry lazily stripped off her clothing and burrowed under the covers. She had been so noisy when learning just now, but now all she could hear were the cute sounds of her little sister sleeping. Henry quietly closed her eyes. Having worked her brains so hard earlier, Henry was certain she would fall asleep right away. Just as she expected, she passed out within seconds of closing her eyes. She did not know how long she had slept, but a distant sound woke her from her slumber. 3 knocks. A pause, and then 3 more knocks. Henry realized what that rhythm meant, and so she forced her eyes open in the darkness. Her mind woke with abnormal speed and realized she was still at home, and so she practically leapt out of bed. In the same moment, her sister bolted awake too. "Are you all right?" "Mm." Her voice had an undertone of fear in it, but it sounded like she could still move. "Get ready now." "Mm." Lighting a lamp would waste too much time, so Henry prepared herself to flee in the dark. As the sound of the bells carried over the wind, Henry and Nemu readied themselves swiftly. Theirs was a speed born not just of repeated evacuation drills, but of the old terror that remained from when their village had been attacked in the past. And after hearing Agu's words, she had an idea of what was coming. "Nemu, get to the rendezvous point. I'll take care of my end." Without waiting for her sister's answer, Henry grabbed Nemu's hand and ran out the door. The bell was still ringing loudly, which meant there was an emergency situation. In addition, it signaled that they were definitely under attack. A corner of her heart still hoped that this was just one of many training exercises, but the chill in the air denied that. It was the same chill she had felt when the soldiers attacked the village. As they neared the rendezvous point, Henry pushed Nemu forward. "All right, go." Nemu nodded very slightly in reply, and then dashed toward the meeting place without looking back. After doing that, Henry was briefly filled with the impulse to follow her, to make sure she at least got into the shelter before leaving. However, as a days-old village chief, Henry had to consider how she would move the whole village. "If I hadn't been appointed, or if I'd been appointed for a long time," those feelings now flowed out uncontrollably from her heart. "It's as though some evil god wants to see us suffer." Without thinking, Henry let the words slip out of her mouth. This was the worst possible timing for something like this to happen. "Ainsan." A goblin ran up to Henry. "What happened? What's going on?" "We found monsters in the forest. High chance they'll be attacking us." "Understood, now let's go." With the goblin leading the way, Henry soon came to the main gate. She saw that the nighttime barricades were set up and the goblins had gathered here. They looked like seasoned veterans in the weapons and armor Henry had bought for them. As she drew close, she could scent a stink in the air, which clued Henry into the fact that there were ogres present. The ogres clutched their new clubs, which looked spiky and menacing. Enr and the goblin reached the main gate at the same time as a panting Nympharia, and the members of the self-defense force led by Brita. In addition, Agu, and some of his fellow goblins, the ones whose minds recovered enough from their ordeal to fight, stood with them as well. "Is that everyone? How about Lizzie-san? Did something keep her?" Nympharia's grandmother Lizzie was a skill magic caster in her own right. By rights, she should have taken part in defending the main gate. "No, Oba-chan's not coming here. She's at the rendezvous point. That place is important too." The villagers nodded as they heard Nympharia's words. Since their family members had fled to the rendezvous point, they had to keep it secure too. "We've sent our guys who aren't good with bows over there. Since you guys are strong, can you spare someone to go over and keep their spirits up?" "We can't do that." Jug-Emu flatly refused Brita's request. Jug-Emu and the others had not done this out of malice toward the villagers whom he had lived and worked with. As the surging tension made Henry gulp, Jug-Emu explained his position. "There's a lot of monsters. And there are many other species, in addition to ogres. Splitting up would be very dangerous. Do you have a clear picture of their numbers? Brita-san, the enemy was lurking in the forest. There's no way to accurately judge their numbers. However, we did manage to get an estimate: 7 ogres, several giant snakes, several wargs, several Barghest-like shapes, and something huge following behind them. Wargs traveling giant snakes and ogres. Is there a druid behind them? Wargs were magical beasts that looked like wolves, but bigger. They were smarter than wolves and bad news if you encountered them in the forest. It's very likely. Things will be really bad if they have a magic caster on their side. We can probably assume that they also have ranged attackers. So it would be better to marshal all our fighting power here, right? Should I call Oba-chan over? That is hard to say, Ani-san. The rendezvous point is one of the most solid buildings in the village. If anything happens, it'll be the final defensive line, or in other words, the village's keep. We can't let anyone protecting that place leave. So we'll be falling back as we fight, then? Where should I be fighting? Brita-san, you'll be directing the defense force. I hope you can clearly relay my orders to them, and do as the situation requires. So we'll use anti-invader strategy number 2, then? After filling them with arrows, we'll use barricades to keep them at bay while we stab them through the gaps with spears. They won't need to aim at people, just keep stabbing. That's right, I'll leave that to you then. However, wargs and barghests are very agile. If allowed to roam freely, they'll cause a lot of damage. Target them first. Also, when their druid shows up, would you mind falling back? I'm not opposed to that, but will you have enough people on the front if the defense force retreats? If we're lucky, we'll be enough. I see. As I thought, I'd better tell everyone here to be ready to die. At least, if we're in the back we won't be attacked, so we can concentrate ranged fire on the druid. You know, I've been an adventurer, but this is the first time I've seen such brave villagers. At least, I thought that much when I watched them train with bows. That's because the village was attacked in the past, and we hated how powerless we were. Henry, who had been silent up till now, chimed in with the sentiments of every member of the defense forces. The truth was, despite their pale faces, nobody here wanted to flee. They had to stand and fight, had to protect their village. After all, their friends and loved ones were behind them. Speaking of which, such a large force must have been gathered by a powerful being. Does this mean they've been sent by the Giant of the East, or the Serpent of the West? That's not impossible. Jug-Emu softly confirmed Brita's suspicions. If that was the case, it would mean Aga had drawn the monsters here. That was why Jug-Emu had lowered his voice, so the defense force would not pick up on it, and direct their aggression at Aga. They had already told the villagers about the Giant of the East and the Serpent of the West, as well as the fact that their power rivaled that of the wise king of the forest. Although the beast had been tamed by the Dark Hero, the mighty monster's form and presence had been etched indelibly on the villagers' hearts. Fear was the appropriate response to the thought of fighting something on the same level as that, foes which they had no chance of beating. So the Serpent of the West uses weird magic? Damn, what a pain. Nfiria nodded at Brita's mumbling. Usually, monsters with racial spells won't have more than 10 of them, but if they're the type which can practice and learn magic, they'll have access to many more, which makes them troublesome. If they know magic that allows them to cross the walls, I'm